So part 2 of Ellen and Gary. So what happened? You got a divorce. Your son was 16 years old. And
Right. So by this time, years before, because I'd always been working on myself. So this is just for anyone listening, whether you're in a couple, going to couple with someone, fishing around, whatever it is, the more you work on yourself, the better able you are to couple. That's all. How else can I say that? And still, you have limitations and blind spots and, you know, subconscious things that pop out and, you know, surprises in yourself. So anyway, so years before any anger that I had, that I couldn't get Gary to do what I wanted him to do, which, by the way, forget about that. Keep your eyes on your own plate, so to speak. And you can invite and you can inspire, but you can't really get anybody to do anything that you want them to do that they don't want to do, even if they are unaware of it. Underneath, there may be something very practical and growth producing for them that prevents them from doing what you want them to do. One of the great things somebody said to me once was, you know, Ellen, it's not all about you. It was a good thing I could laugh about that. So, so anyway, so all my anger had been dissipated in the past, and I had even had issues about, I was the one who was basically in charge of the household and organizing and supervising the life of our son and keeping things going. And yeah, I'm a great organizer, but you know, I woke up and I went, oh my God, I'm controlling and I'm handling everything. So any resentment or resistance or negative feeling I'd had about that, I let go of that years before too. So at this point, I was in a great position to create a loving divorce, which meant, trying to attend to see what everyone needed. And I knew that Gary was upset because he didn't really get it. He didn't get it.
what a loving divorce was.
No, he didn't get why.
Why
Yeah.
why you wanted to divorce.
Yeah, he said something very sweet. He says, I can't believe you're not going to give me a second chance. And all those years I was articulating, oh, honey, I know you have feelings. And he'd have a funny look on his face. I'd say, you know, something's going on, you know, what are you feeling? And he'd say, I don't know what you mean by what's a feeling, he would say.
So it was really hard on him when you asked for the divorce. It was so not hard. It wasn't a mutual, sure, okay, let's give each other a break. Yeah.
And I knew the value of continuing our relationship for the benefit of our son. Plus, this was my friend, and I was supposed to go, in my mind, the whole lifetime with him. And so in that way, I had a lot of grief inside, not knowing if he was going to go off and be with someone else or if he might get angry and say, screw you or whatever, which he did not. I think he was more in shock. And so, but I know how to take loving care of somebody who's in shock, and I helped him move, but not in a codependent way. It was like, sort of like a social worker helping somebody.
Yeah. So when you got this divorce, you weren't, I mean, obviously you didn't know that 6 years later you're going to remarry. And
no, it was never a thought. Never.
It was done. Yeah.
And I find that for myself, you know, it's like, because some friends said, well, why don't you just get separated? But I knew that that wasn't going to do it. It needed to be a clean
cut.
Yeah. And during that time, he had a job where he was off on Tuesdays and Wednesdays. And we spent Tuesdays and Wednesdays together.
Even though you were divorced? Wow.
Which was lovely. And because anytime we were on vacation ever, even before, there was never an issue. I don't know why. I think I felt alone in a way that didn't feel good, even though we were together. I had trouble that there was a person there who looked like I could communicate with them, only it was frustrating for me. It felt sort of better that if I didn't have a person there, then I wouldn't be expecting to communicate. And I'm going to say that all of this is irrational. I mean, they're feelings and you have to validate them. But it wasn't until after that that I learned later on that feelings are not facts.
Can you say more about that?
Yeah. So I had a teacher once, because people would say, I feel angry because you didn't talk to me. So my teacher would say, and trying to sort that out, this person is not responding to me, and I feel angry. And so you could get caught up in, if you could just respond to me, then, I wouldn't have to go through this. Or isn't it just easy to respond? I don't care what you say, just respond. So, but my teacher June would say, separate the feeling from the thing that you think it's giving to you. So I feel angry, and then I'm talking to you and you're not responding to me. And she would say, separate them, because they cannot be resolved unless they're separated. If you take I feel angry and just own it, separate from what the other person is doing, then you could deal with I feel angry, because this is not the first time you felt angry in your life. But when a person has felt angry many times in their lives, connected to all different kinds of things. That's why you can't resolve it when it's just attached to one thing. And there's many ways to resolve it. You could say, well, I don't like feeling angry. Well, the easy fix to that is, so what? Just feel it. It's a human thing. Sometimes that resolves it for a person. Another person, I feel angry and I know I'm more angry at what's happening now than I should be. Well, then you get to trace that anger back to shreds and threads of other things in your life that you've brought forward, without paying attention to it. And you can undo it that way. Nevertheless, this issue over here, when I talk with you, it's a common courtesy to respond. And I would like common courtesy in our relationship. And if you have your own issues about how I'm talking to you or what's going on, well, then that person can separate their feelings from the practicality of their being courteous. So one has to do with sort of a very superficial way of communicating with common courtesy and the depths of feelings. And even at the practical level of the courtesy, in my relationship with Gary, what we discovered was anytime I spoke to him, he felt criticized and he didn't respond because he was going through a whole thing in his head about feeling judged and criticized.
Yeah.
So go ahead.
I was going to say, so talk about how that breakthrough occurred 6 years later that brought the two of you back together, because you're already leading to that.
Right.
Yeah. And I thought that was really beautiful.
So what happened, and believe me, this was a total surprise to me because I was focused on other things. I was enjoying those 2 days a week with him. He was enjoying 2. He was in his own place. I went to visit him. There are a couple of funny things that happened about that, but I'll tell you that after. And so I think it was in about the 6th year, he said to me, you know, Elle, I finally figured out what was wrong with me. And I never said anything was wrong with him, ever, ever, ever. I said things like, listen, whatever's going on inside of you, I know you can work it out and, you know, work on yourself. Maybe you'll feel better, whatever. So I said, well, what was that? And he said, well, he said, every time you opened your mouth, all I ever heard was my mother's voice. And I was like, wow. And I thought to myself, wow, this is the most intimate communication I could imagine. This was like the crux. And there were many times during those previous years where I would say something to him and I could see he would like either not respond or whatever. And I would say, honey, I don't know what's going on, but I'm not your mother. Now, I had no connection with that. What I was saying, he was interpreting that way. It was just the thought that came to me. Like, you don't have to be afraid of me. You know?
Yeah.
I'm your choice. You know, I don't have power over you, you know.
And so by him saying that, that sort of opened the door for you to fall in love with him again.
Oh, it was immediate. It was immediate. It was immediate. And later he shared with me that, you know, maybe the 5-6 years of not hearing my voice, because here we were bringing up a son and he had been a son. So anytime he saw this mother and that boy interact, he might have been having throwbacks to situations with him and his mother that may have looked the same or different. You know, very often when you set boundaries when adults set boundaries with children, to onlookers, it could look like, you know, you're not being nice and things like that, you know, just from firmness and, you know, yeah, you have to brush your teeth now and that's it, you know. So, and I felt that inside myself instantly. My heart opened up, and there were some things that came up then after that were very sweet. Other things like our son had moved to Ohio and he was graduating college, and he said, Mom, and he knew we were divorced, of course, said, Mom, I'm going to stay out here. Do you think you and Dad would want to come out here? So I said to our son, I said, well, I know for sure I will. I said, but I'll mention it to Daddy and see what he says. So I mentioned it to Gary and he said, oh yeah, sure. And I was like, oh, okay. And then Gary said, well, why don't you go look for a place out there? And in the interim, I didn't tell you this. In the interim, I had been in the house with an imported girlfriend who helped me support the house, and we had sold the house. My friend and I, because she helped me buy Gary out, and at that point, I needed a place to go, and I had arrangements with 3 girlfriends over my life that if we ever needed a place to pitch a tent, so to speak, temporarily, we would be that for each other. So those 3 girlfriends, all those spots were filled. So I couldn't go to any of them while I was figuring out what I was going to do. And Gary had said, well, you know, Elle, you could stay here. And I got like, ooh. And this was after that awakening. And I said, well, you know, I'd be afraid that, you know, I'd fall back into my old thinking, you know, if we were living together, and I wouldn't want to project my previous perceptions onto you if I discovered that I was going to feel those old ways. I really didn't know, you know, you could put somebody back in their old environment and it could trigger all kinds of things. And he said he felt that way too. But he said something really great. He said, well, why don't we figure out a way to signal each other that if that's going to happen, we'll put it on the table and talk about it. And I was like, what did this person do with my husband? Who is this person? And so that was like laying the groundwork. And then I moved in
to start over again.
Yeah, and then I moved in, and that was that.
Okay. So we don't have a lot of time left. So what would you do anything differently if you had it to do all over again?
I can't think. I pondered that question, and I can't think of anything because I was doing my best. I was already doing my best, and my best was limited by my awareness and my maturity. So I think as long as, I mean, if I could have pushed that further, but I didn't know how, and I still, looking back, go to another counselor. I don't know.
You know, if you had done anything different, it would have been a different relationship. I mean, it was perfect. What happened was perfect the way it happened, because it was this process that you both went through and you grew as a couple, and your relationship has now been strengthened by that separation that you had. And then you've got 20 more years out of it so far, and still counting, right?
Yes. And that we don't have any of those trappings from before that were issues for him or for me. He doesn't feel criticized by me anymore. I don't feel like he's not emotionally intimate anymore. And we have all the things that were wonderful before.
Great. That's wonderful. So, well, Ellen, what would you say to a woman? This is something I just threw in this morning. I didn't show it to you.
Okay.
But, you know, we both work with women and couples and so forth. And I'm sure you've heard many times a woman saying, I'm just going to give up. There's no good guys out there. And I think I'm just going to stay single. So what's your advice to women when they close up shop and decide, that's it, I've had enough of the bad guys?
So here's the thing. You can always stay single. Nobody is going to make you couple. So you've got that already. So you don't have to lock yourself into it. And then change your approach to something like exploratory or adventuresome. You always want to keep yourself safe. So you're not throwing care to the wind unless you have some kind of spiritual awakening and all of a sudden you're different. That when you, and to take the position that even though you have excellent assessment skills and great intuition, that there's always things that are a mystery, and that you can go to meet someone. Always keep yourself safe though. You know, pay attention to your inner feelings and things like that. So you set it up so that you're really taking care of yourself. And within that context, go in like you're interviewing someone who's going to have a very important job in your life, and make up questions. And you could go with your list of questions, you could review them, and then like here we're just talking, and listen in yourself for like a yes or a no. And my friend Karen, she used to say, if you get a green light, then you can go to the next episode. So whether it's having coffee out, or I don't recommend meeting anybody in a bar though, because once you have alcohol in play, you have no idea how much the other person uses it.
Yes.
And that's a really blind alley.
Oh, definitely.
So whether it's out to lunch a walk, whatever, with other people around. And, you know, see how much you can find out. Usually people like to talk about themselves. So you get the person to talk, and I know some people who don't like to ask probing questions, but you can ask them in a way with curiosity and sincere interest. Like, you know, so what's your relationship history? You know, in a way that the person could feel like they could be honest or start to talk, or even to say, oh, I'm uncomfortable talking about that. And then you could say, oh my God, I'm uncomfortable too. You know, where you're sort of staging as an authentic interaction as possible. And the staging part is where you use your awareness like you're operating yourself. Yes, you're natural and that, but you're also thinking, I call it strategic nurturing communication, where you're thinking about how to say things in a neutral way that don't point a finger at the other person, and creates an environment where they could say, oh, I'm afraid to say that. Or you could see on their face and you could go, uh-oh, what did I touch? Or, you know, I don't, you know, something like that.
Yeah. Well, the last question that I want to have you answer, Ellen, is what advice do you have to young couples?
Okay. I thought about this too. So when you've chosen to interact with someone and you're looking at yourself, always look at yourself and think about what part in this, let's say you encounter a difference, or it's like, what part in this are my attitudes and issues from the past? So just notice, oh God, you know, I have some people come to me in counseling and say, oh, I have a pattern, or I have a history of saying this. When the other person gets closer to me, I say something that like pushes them away and I can't stop. You know, so where you can sort of become kinder and kinder to yourself about what your own issues are. The other things are the things that I mentioned before about dealing with feelings and practicalities separately. So it's very easy to get mixed up. And I like something I like to call the continuous conversation theory. I don't know where this came from. So that, let's say you have a conversation on this day, then you get together 3 or 4 other times. And then on the 5th time, you can actually bring the person back and say, remember when we were having this conversation? I had some additional thoughts about it. And then you start that conversation again and you bring it forward. So even if you don't get to handle something, you know, sometimes people go away from an interaction, go, oh, I can never say what I want at the moment I want to say it. So you say, you know what, I was thinking about something you said. So the other person's ears perk up and you bring them back and you say, you go back to that moment and say, listen, were you talking about this or were you talking about that? Or, you know, I interpreted this way, but I don't want to interpret something that you're saying because I don't want to make a mistake and misinterpret something that you say. So it's a little bit like having a magnifying glass to see deeper what's going on. And because we all have different gates of self-protection and nervousness and vulnerability. And so if each person does that, if you can get that so that each person is doing something like that, then later on you can compare notes about it without pointing a finger. You can't go wrong saying, you know what, this is what I experienced. And you just have to watch out that the other person doesn't then take that and use it against you. And then you go, hey, wait a minute. wait a minute, I'm coming to you authentically and honestly. And I want you to do that with me from where you are.
Yeah.
This isn't about us pointing fingers at each other.
Yeah.
Just don't get me going that way.
Well, Ellen, thank you so much for joining me here today as my first couple to interview to discuss staying true to the self in a healthy relationship.